As you can see, I've finally managed to finish the line drawing part of my intro, and now I need to start thinking about what colour I'm going to include. I'm sure I'll end up referring to it a number of times in this video, so if I repeat myself, I do apologise. But the first thing that you need to know about this watch is that it's a Japan-only model, and so if you do want one, your three choices are either a second-hand model, which I would say is very rare given the quality on offer here, importing one, or picking one up while actually in Japan. So although the prices you might find online may look tempting, bear in mind there are likely to be hidden costs involved in purchasing one of these watches. For me, naming this watch is actually quite difficult. I only own one Citizen, so my Citizen is normally what I'd call it at home. For the purposes of the video, referring to it as the NB1060-12L isn't going to flow very well. It's definitely one area that I think Citizen could work on to advertise their watches in a more marketable way. The other thing I'd say about Citizen's marketing is the packaging. If I'm honest, the small functional packaging is more environmentally friendly fare than you get from some of Citizen's rival brands. And as I've mentioned before, I often don't know what to do with a fancy watch box after I've opened it anyway. However, this is a watch that's in the same bracket as the Baltic MR01, the Christopher Ward Trident, and the Zodiac Super Seawolf that I've featured in my last three videos. By comparison, there's absolutely no theatre or sense of luxury with the packaging here. What clearly jumps out about the watch is the dial. It's a silver lacquer construction. The base of the dial is coated with a silver foil, which is then followed by a thin layer of lacquer pigment. While these materials are not necessarily particularly expensive on their own, the process is done entirely by hand, and for the watch it means that each dial is unique. Sadly, I'm still new to using a macro lens, and I just can't do this dial justice. It really is incredible. Having looked at videos online regarding the blue dial in particular, I noticed that some had rusty looking orangey red sections that really made the dial pop. Now, I'm not a chemist, so I don't profess to know the ins and outs of what's happened during the process, but it looks as though parts of the dial have oxidised, although I thought the whole point of lacquer was to prevent that. At any rate, I really like the look of it. It reminds me of the patina you might get on a rusted old pickup truck. That would be one slight criticism of my own watch. There are only tiny flecks of origin there compared to some other examples that I've seen online. That's my favourite part of this watch, just looking at the dial. It puts me in mind of staring through the atmosphere of an alien world, surveying its mountains and its valleys. It's captivating, and I regularly find myself lost in it long after I've stopped actually checking the time. And while this is not an inexpensive watch, I think you'd be really hard pushed to find a better textured dial for less. If you're someone who likes to show off your watches to other people, this is definitely one that they're going to double take at when they get a look at it up close. The ridges from the foil catch light and cast shadow in equal measure, giving a real sense of depth, and the viewing experience changes dramatically under different lighting conditions, to the point where you could swear that the dial was alive and moving. Before purchasing the watch, I read several reviews first. It's quite nerve-wracking buying something as a JDM import. Obviously it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to return. And you're not just paying the cost of the watch, but it costs a lot for shipping, and depending on where you live, a lot in terms of import tax too. One thing that initially concerned me was the strap. It's built for the Japanese market and not sized for Western wrists. I'm quite lucky in that it fits me on one of the final holes of the strap. And it is comfortable, and obviously, given that it's a proprietary strap, the colour matching is on point. It has a button release on the clasp that gives the watch a little bit more of a premium feel. But I did take time to look at alternative options. And it isn't something that's necessarily straightforward. Because of the awkward lug width of 19mm, there just aren't as many viable options out there. One avenue I did explore was getting a bracelet for the watch. The bracelet from the NB1050 would fit this model, but I wouldn't say Citizen are necessarily famed for their bracelets at the lower end of their range. The NB1050 bracelet has no micro links and no micro adjust, so the chances of getting a good fit are unlikely. More problematic than that, as far as I'm aware, The NB1050 is also a JDM only model and not the most recent release, so finding just the bracelet proved impossible. There were JDM sites that listed them, but none with any in stock. So the only way to procure one would have been to buy an NB1050, plus the shipping, plus the import tax, just to get the bracelet. Not worth it at all in my opinion, but if you happen to own an NB1050 already, definitely worth considering. The Movement is an in-house 9011 caliber that offers hacking, a 42-hour power reserve and a solid level of finishing. It isn't going to blow anyone away, but it's solid for the price. Certainly it's well finished enough that Citizen has thought to include a display case back to show it off. It has a few nice touches, with a unidirectional skeletonized rotor featuring gold engraving being the most eye-catching element. In terms of size, I think the dimensions here are almost perfect for a dress watch. 38.2mm is right in the middle of my 36 to 40mm range and really hits a sweet spot. Though I know that many would perhaps prefer to go slightly smaller for a dress watch, and certainly I know slightly thinner, with something like this, having more space for the dial makes sense. The beauty of the range is they look fantastic up close at a macro level, but they're actually quite inconspicuous from distance, so would go well with any work or formal attire. My other dress watches are vintage from the 60s and 70s, and so they only really come out on special occasions. This is something I can wear regularly without as much worry in terms of a scratch or a dent. As a dress watch, this doesn't have any lume on it. To be honest, I think that would really spoil the overall look of the piece anyway. But if you're expecting it to do anything at night, it won't. What it does offer is a very clear viewing experience of the dial, with minimalist raised markers, a raised Citizen logo, and a framed date complication, the only things that feature on the dial. It also has a set of half-brushed, half-polished sword hands, and a razor-thin second hand. And if I'm being honest, sword hands are definitely a personal favourite of mine, and these are extremely well executed. There aren't that many watches available with a silver lacquer dial from Citizen, and information is harder to come by as these are JDM only releases. I found 4 in total, and I'd say the white dial options don't necessarily make the most sense, as the colour of the green and the blue models is probably the biggest appeal of these watches. I do think the blue is the pick of the bunch, as the green dial is busier and not as focused on the texture, which is the real appeal here. I think that these watches, and in particular their dials, do represent a very good middle ground for people who want to own a Grand Seiko dial, but perhaps don't have the funds for one. I think they're a step up from the likes of the Seiko Cocktail range, though I am also a fan of those watches. If you're looking to purchase one, I would strongly recommend eBay as the place to go. I spent over a month scouring the internet before purchasing mine, and eBay was consistently the cheapest place to look. The only thing that I would say is that often the cheapest prices are from smaller watch shops in more obscure parts of Japan. If this was China, you might expect that would translate to a long delay in getting the watch shipped. Certainly I've had to wait a long time for Chinese import watches in the past. But I have to praise DHL here and the efficiency of the shop that I purchased through. Mine arrived 3 days after ordering. I've ordered watches within the UK that have taken significantly longer than that to turn up. If you have a little more to spend, but perhaps not enough for a Grand Seiko, or you just want an alternative, Citizen does have a washi paper dial range that sits between the silver lacquer and Grand Seiko money. The watch itself is titled Citizen, the Citizen, and there are a number of interesting colourways available. Some of them are extremely limited though, with only 250 of each produced. My personal preference would be the Azure model, which is very similar in design to the blue silver lacquer, in both form and colour, but that dial is another step up in terms of the texture and depth that it offers. I think Citizen as a brand can often be overlooked as an option, and a lot of their best models are saved for their domestic market. This is where doing your research can really pay off, and to that end I hope that this video has been helpful to you. As for Grand Seiko themselves, I'll get to them in another video. I just want to finish by thanking everyone for watching. When I started this channel a couple of months ago, I just wanted to make videos that I would personally enjoy, both in terms of making and watching. I thought that across the space of a year, If I could get a video with 1,000 views, maybe hit 100 subscribers, that would be all the validation I needed that my content was worth making, beyond the enjoyment that I get from creating it. So to have hit those long-term goals within my first 3 videos really meant a lot to me, and I hope you stick around for the videos yet to come.